it's actually kind of funny you bring up Final Fantasy and you bring up all these type of games, mostly because one of the first topics I wanted to kind of talk about was just JRPGs, our action RPGs, and just in general how they've changed over the years and how they're different compared to like now.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then it's weird because I'm not much of like of a turn-based RPG player.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start mixing other elements and other games into it, like action RPGs and stuff like that, then you could start seeing me interested. And it's funny that you mentioned the whole backtracking thing, because in RPGs, there's a lot of backtracking.
Yes.
And what's ironic is that you mentioned the fact that with Final Fantasy, you're always doing something new because it's like an MMO experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could both come to the conclusion that depending on the reason as to why you're backtracking could either be fun or really boring.
Yeah. Especially when you got it, like, I guess it would depend on what you're backtracking for.
Right.
If you're trying to, like, 100% something and that's the type of gamer that you are,
right,
then the backtracking's not bad, right? But when you're like, I don't know, when you're like 9-10 hours into a game, or you're like really deep into the story,
yeah,
and then they turn around and go, oh, hey, did you speak to so and so, or you're trying to unlock this door and you don't have a fucking key and you don't know where it's at.
Yeah.
And then it dawns on you that you got to backtrack, like way the hell over it. Now that, to me, that just gets annoying as hell. It's if you can't leave the key in the same, fucking dungeon, then don't even give me a key.
Right.
And you got to do the same thing with MMOs too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there comes a point where, and that's why fast travel is so great, because you're going to get sick and tired of, running out of the, the same building over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's weird because I've been actually playing Fallout. I've been playing Fallout 4 on survival mode lately.
Uh-huh.
And Fallout 4 on survival mode, what makes Fallout 4 interesting with survival is that there is a lot of backtracking because you constantly die. It's because it's backtracking. Actually, I take that back, because you're not only backtracking if you die,
uh-huh.
You're actually backtracking if you go back, and if you ever, you can't loot everything off the ground because you have a weight limit.
Really?
So you have a weight limit of like 126 in survival mode,
uh-huh.
And it's immersive. Like, it really gets down to the purpose of what type of experience you're looking for in this game.
Let me ask you this: so you shoot somebody or you kill somebody, and you're only able to grab half of their shit, right?
Yeah.
So that you truck all the way back to unload that stuff.
Yeah.
Is he still dead when you come back?
Yes.
And so you still loot him again. So you just get the rest of his loot. He doesn't like respawn or anything. He's just dead.
He's just dead. I mean, unless there's some sort of system in place where there are new enemies, but for the most part, usually most enemies and this goes to not just, Fallout in general, but this goes to a lot of the games that go for the RPG elements, is that when they're dead, the enemies are dead.
Yeah. Now, when you've gone back to look for the enemy, have you lost them?
Lost them.
Well, yeah, you go back and then you go over and you start looking for him. You're like, fuck, where did this dead dude go? I want the rest of this loot. Where is he at? And you can't find him. Or are you really good at finding him?
Well, me, I haven't really ran into that issue because I don't loot everything. But,
okay.
But no, in a sense, depending on that, I could probably loot. I could easily lose them too.
I loot everything. I'm a loot whore.
I like that, and I feel like with the weight limit, that would be an issue.
It would piss me off.
What's interesting, because you mentioned fast travel, you mentioned backtracking, is what really kind of makes up for that is that immersive feeling of like, oh, like, shoot, this is a hardcore experience. If I die, then I'm gonna have to go back and do this all over. I love the immersive experience of Fallout, and I love the immersive experience of survival, but I don't necessarily like backtracking and going through if I'm dying. Like, if I'm looting stuff, that's fine, but if it's pushing me back to invest in the story, that's kind of makes it not worth, backtracking.
I mean, and of course it's great when you can skip through the text and stuff like
Right.
that. I think like some of the memories that are kicking back as far as like hardcore backtracking.
Yeah.
Is like some of the battles that I would get into on Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah.
Now, though 14 is a little bit easier as far as when it groups people up, but the fights are long. I mean, some of them are like 10, 15, 20 minutes long. You run through the dungeon. And
you're talking
sucks.
14, right?
Huh?
You're talking 14, right?
Yes.
Because 11 and 14 feel similar, but they're different.
They are different.
Yeah.
It's 14 was more of a, like, I think they catered it more towards like the American MMO player. But nothing's more frustrating than almost killing the boss after traveling through all the goddamn dungeons, and then like your mage dies. All right, you're like, fuck. So you gotta like try and raise your mage, right? But then the dude's beating the crap out of you, and he's only got like a butt hair worth of life left. But he runs around here, and then he just annihilates everybody, and then you die. And then you gotta go all the way back to the beginning. And you gotta respawn, back into the world map. And sometimes, like, you really get fucked, and you respawn all the way back into town. And you have to walk all the way back to the point, wait for a group to join up again, and then it's frustrating as hell. That was one of the things that along with grinding, that was one of the things that annoyed me the most.
Okay.
About MMO games.
Just for the sake of using the term casual gamer, do you think that is sort of why more gamers are kind of opening up to the idea? Because developers are kind of realizing that, this going backtracking is not fun, so let's implement like a fast travel. And let's implement, different tools to make it easier for the gamer to have fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say so. I think that's kind of the key. I mean, like, beforehand, we didn't have things like fast travel.
No.
Or anything like that. I mean,
if you go back to RPGs, like, those are really, when you think about it, that's really a hardcore experience.
Yeah. It's really hard. And your save points were very far and few between. So, I mean, and of course, we're talking like, Super Nintendo and shit like that. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy. And I think that's one of the things why I've gotten back into more like casual RPGs. Like I want to play Final Fantasy 15. I do. But I mean, my God, some people are telling me that's like 120, 160 hours, right? And I don't have that time to invest much anymore, Right. And I think it was one of like I don't know. Would you consider like something like Uncharted? An RPG or more like an action RPG?
That's kind of hard to say because, then we get into the question exactly what makes a game an RPG. Okay. Like, because when I go like to go back with Fallout, we'll go back to Fallout 4, and especially because there's a new game in Fallout coming out, which is strictly online. It's going to be almost like this online MMO, almost like a hybrid MMO kind of experience. Yeah. With Fallout, it's called Fallout 76. But going back to that topic as to what makes an RPG is I always run into, like, I see these arguments. Oh, that's not a true RPG because it's, it's casualized, or it has tools to kind of help people along, like, oh, this is not the hardcore RPG experience. And then you go into the aspect of like an RPG, people saying that, oh, well, it doesn't have like the role-playing aspects, or like you're able to customize your character, or why is there voice acting in this game? It kind of ruins the fact of you actually role-playing, quote-unquote role-playing, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't think, for a game like Uncharted 4, no, I don't. That is not an RPG, because that is that's more of an action adventure game. In Uncharted 4, it's clear as day. There's not really RPG elements. There's not really a looting system. There's not really like stats or anything like that. It's simply an adventure. It's just simply an adventure third-person shooter game. That's strictly like that. So when you take a game where it's like an FPS action game with RPG elements, with say something along the lines like Fallout 4, because people say it kind of bridges the gap between an RPG. So I would say that like you have genres that are kind of mixing with each other than just being a strictly an RPG game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how I see it.
So with Fallout 4, you're able to adjust your stats, your hit points,
yeah,
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
where you're saying like with something like Uncharted, where you don't necessarily have anything.
No, you're not upgrading anything. It's mainly for the story. It's mainly for the action, and it's kind of interesting that you brought Uncharted 4 up, because I don't know what made you think Uncharted 4 was an RPG game at all.
Well, but I always see, because for me, I'm RPG, role playing game,
right?
Okay, when you take on the role of someone else, whether it's Nathan Drake,
right,
or whether it's Cloud Strife, from Final Fantasy VII or whatever, right? You play as that individual. You take on the role of someone, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a story, there's a plot, and then there's the whole piece of it, which is the game. So the mechanics of it, I've never really considered much the determining factor between, an Uncharted or a Final Fantasy or something like that. Now, I mean, there's some people who would probably disagree. I mean, some people would also disagree to the point that the fact that you just because you can't change the name to your own, right, then you're not really taking on,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
right.
I mean, when you look at games like, I mean, Final Fantasy 14 or something like that, granted that's it's an MMORPG, right, where you change the name and, and you change your look and stuff like that, it immerses you more into the role that you're playing.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, there's a story to it and you're playing as a particular character, wouldn't that necessarily just be an RPG?
You would think.
Right?
I
understand the action point of it.
I get your point, because you're still taking on a role of someone else. Because, like, someone can't refute the point that you are taking a role as someone else, but it would almost be like going into, Disneyland or something like that, and they're telling you to get into the ride or something like that. Oh, well, you are now going to go into the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
You are sort of kind of playing into the role of like, oh, you're on this boat, but you're sort of separated from that, where it's like, oh, okay, you kind of get this.
So you have no control.
You have no control over the actual character's emotions or choices in the matter. So, like, you get immersed into certain parts of the character, and you get immersed into the story, but you're more as kind of like a third party or a third perspective into it. Okay. While sort of feeling what the character is through the story rather than making your own story.
In that sense, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so then what we'll do then is compare. Let's compare the MMOs,
right?
The MMORPGs,
yeah,
with your standard issue RPG. Let's take Final Fantasy 15,
yeah,
and Final Fantasy 14.
You're right.
Final Fantasy 14, all right?
Mm-hmm.
I could be whoever I want.
Yeah.
I could choose whatever class I choose.
Yeah.
Okay? I start wherever I want to start.
Yeah.
Right? And I pick and choose the quests and the adventures and stuff like this that I choose. And my whole gameplay is based off of that. Where with Final Fantasy 15, right, I am one character.
Right.
Okay? Who... I mean, yes, I can do whatever I want.
You can still do whatever you want.
But if I want to progress to the end, right,
mm-hmm.
I have to do the story. I have to participate in the story.
Yeah.
Where with 14, there are multiple story points, you know,
Yeah.
and I can sort of craft it the way I want.
Yeah.
Both of which are referred to as an RPG. Nathan Drake, right? Even though, yes, as Nathan Drake, okay, you are going through a story plot, right? Going from chapter to chapter, event to event, right? But how you tackle that event is completely up to you, correct? If I want to go around the side, and if I want to, like, you know, shank everybody, or if I want to just go straight balls out and just shoot everybody, I mean, you still have somewhat of a choice.
Somewhat, and only in some aspects. But yeah, they're more linear, but the whole idea is to kind of give you the immersion of player choice. When in reality, you know,
do you really have a choice?
Do you really have a choice? No, you don't.
I would think then a true RPG lives in the massive multiplayer sort of realm then.
Yeah, in a sense, or even not even in massive multiplayer, or even in the single player where you have almost unlimited control as to what your character can do.
Yeah, I like Fallout 4.
Fallout 4, and then people still kind of argue with the fact that it's more of an action game than an RPG because, and I think it's kind of a mix between the two because you're borrowing elements, because we got to a point in gaming where you can't call one game a specific genre anymore unless it's clearly obvious.
Really?
Yeah, like there's a game, like I guess if you really want to call like some RPG elements, is like then you're getting into a topic when it comes down to like the difference between an Americanized RPG versus a Japanese RPG game.
All right.
And you know, JRPG games are more, you see those as more turn-based RPGs.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, a traditional Americanized RPGs not turn-based.
Okay.
And then you see some games that are kind of blending the two where some of it's turn-based and some of it's not.
Yeah.
And there's this element to strategy.
I think 15 is like that, where everybody has, like, they're in line to move and to interact or attack, right? But the meter is ticking. So you could, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but you could take as long as you want, but everybody else is going to still beat the shit out of you. You know, you gotta move along, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You got to pick up the pace. Nobody's going to stop and wait for you to just, you know, sure. Read all the fucking UI, all right, and just take your time. No, you know,
right.
They're going to kick your ass. And I think that has changed. And I you know, I don't know. I'm mixed with it. I like them both, you know.
Yeah, that's something that sort of was, for me, that was torn because I've only recently got into some JRPGs that are more turn-based, only because I've got into real-time strategy games. But other than that, I probably would have never touched RPGs back in the day, like JRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
But because, like, when you think of, because, like, the whole aspect of what a role-playing game is has sort of changed and kind of delved in the different directions, it allows people to kind of expand more, and it gets more of a general audience than, you know, your strict, you know, run-of-the-mill JRPG game. For example, there was a new game that came out on Switch that got some really good reviews and good topic, or good. I haven't played it much. I played the demo like a few months ago, but it's something I thought about checking out. It's a game called Octopath Traveler.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I don't know who it is. Who publishes the game? I don't know if it's Square Enix or somebody else. I completely forgot about who actually.
What is it?
Octopath Traveler. It's on the Nintendo. It's on the Nintendo Switch, but it.
Octopath Traveler. Oh nope! I pulled up the main thing.
That would be definitely classified as more, say, a JRPG than, say, an action RPG. And I played the demo, and it's interesting because it plays a lot like you know, the old style of Final Fantasy games, and I feel like some of those games are definitely making kind of like a comeback in a sense.
Yeah. Because
of like this nostalgic retro feeling to it. But Octopath is kind of a It's a game that's been highly talked about lately on the Switch. It's pretty cool. But it is generally, from what I understand the game, I haven't played it. I've only probably played the demo.
Yeah.
From what I remember playing of it, it was like you had 6 different characters with their own story. You're still sort of kind of role playing because you have all like the traditional the traditional RPG stuff that you see, like health points, mana, skills. You would level up. But going back to that point that we mentioned, where you're still kind of playing a character in this generated story, it's still kind of interesting how that kind of like blends. It's like it's more of an old style traditional JRPG, if you want to call it that. But it's been doing pretty well, and I've been seeing kind of a lot of RPGs, indie titles, and
I'll check the demo out.
Stuff on the Switch. Yeah, definitely check it out. I think it might be something that you might be interested. So it was developed by Square Enix with a collaboration of Acquire, and it was published for the Nintendo Switch. It came out actually July 13th, and based off the Wikipedia page, it says it's a role-playing game that sports a graphical aesthetics known to HD 2D, where defined by developers as sort of like the 16-bit Super NES style characters, with sprites and all that. And there's voice acting into it a little bit to some extent, and you have ability commands where each character's from a different part of the world, and then you kind of attributes where they determine their job, their class, that kind of stuff. Similar in a sense to where, like with Final Fantasy, and if you want to get back into Final Fantasy 11, I remember where you could choose your race, your class, and then you can choose the town that you live in. So it's sort of like that, but sort of kind of a little bit limited in that retrospect. But
this reminds me, at least the art style, kind of reminds me a little of Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, I think people
that in 12,
right?
Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah, so it definitely kind of follows.
And for the record, Final Fantasy 12 is by far one of my favorite RPGs. I loved Final Fantasy 12. And Final Fantasy 12 was a lot different. Final Fantasy 12 was a single player RPG, but it looked and felt like Final Fantasy 11. So, you had an open world. Well, I mean, open sandbox, right?
Yeah.
And monsters would aggro and they would come after you and stuff like this. But yeah, this looks pretty good. I think I would probably give this a shot.
But so overall, I think the conclusion or the agreement that we come on when it comes down to RPG is usually if you take some sort of part in changing the character's attributes in any sort of way and sort of fitting it to your own role, or feel like you have a part in changing the character, I feel like that kind of plays into what I would count.
That justifies more of what an RPG is.
Yeah, mainly just because like people can go back and forth as to say a game like Mass Effect, because Mass Effect is an action adventure RPG where it's very heavy on the story, but you still have choice over the attributes that your character senses and all that. I mean, something like Skyrim it would be the same way. You can go on and on about RPG titles, and so it's like, oh, what's this and that. But I think to close that topic with some sort of justice is that now we live in an age where you're not just going to see an RPG game, or everything is kind of mixing into its own thing.